Welcome back, everyone. I want to introduce my next guest, TC McCarthy. I'm going to let him give you a little bit of his own background because I'll definitely screw it up. But in terms of the topic today, generally I would start with a detailed backgrounder on TC and his writing career, which we will do. But since this episode's going to air on Friday, February 18th, and we're going to start by discussing the Russia-Ukraine situation, because I think by the following Monday, which is the 21st, it's the day after the Olympics, the day after the exercises in Belarus end, I think it's very, very likely that the war will have started by then. So unfortunately, we're going to have to start with this topic first. So TC, just tell the audience, very briefly about your background, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, sure. First, let me thank you, Sean, for having me on. This is really cool. Glad you're doing a YouTube channel, podcast kind of stuff. So I'm a science fiction writer, first of all, and published my first series of books was published with Hachette Books and their imprint, their science fiction imprint, which was Orbit. And those are Germline, Exogene, and Chimera. And it's really military science fiction. And interestingly enough, the primary adversary in book one is Russia, because I've never trusted those sons of what. And the other adversaries in the subsequent books are still Russia in book two, but then we start transitioning over into more kind of an Asian setting where China is the primary adversary.
And then your background, your professional background.
So I started.
It's kind of relevant.
Yeah. Got my PhD in geology in 98, 99. Thought I wanted to be a patent attorney. Got into law school. Was working at the patent office. Realized that I would wind up slitting my throat if I stayed on that career path. Hated the law. Most boring thing I could have ever possibly gotten involved with. Very lucrative, but I gave it up when I got a phone call from the CIA asking me if I wanted to join them doing intelligence related work on former Soviet Union. I did. I became a weapons expert in weapons of mass destruction. And from there, I went on to a career at the National Laboratories and with Department of Defense. So done a little bit of everything. The interesting thing about what we're going to be discussing first is the topic of gray zone warfare, which is kind of what I was getting into right as I was leaving the National Laboratories. So I haven't done any of that work since, but it's something that's near and dear to my heart. I hope I haven't forgotten all that I've learned about it.
So, and when you say the CIA, you were on the director of intelligence side, not ops.
That's correct. I was an analyst. I was not an operator. Too cowardly to be in the DO.
Well, and also probably not dumb enough with a PhD to kind of go out into the field and get.
And that's true. They tend to hire very young and some people that they can mold from the get-go.
Or former military. Military. It's like the two paths.
Yeah.
Okay. That I know of. Look, I don't. That whole recruiting process is different.
I don't mean to, if I sound like I'm being critical of them, I certainly don't mean to. That was the best job I ever had. In many ways, it was the worst job, but it was also the best job. I tried to go back there at one point. Personal circumstances killed that. If I could go back there and work today, I probably would. I think I would encourage it for anybody who's even remotely interested in doing that. I highly recommend it. Stop doing drugs right now because that is still an issue, even though they've legalized pot in certain states. Can't do it. And then if you're out there smoking dope, give yourself about 5, 6, 7 years, then apply.
Yeah, and by the way, don't lie about it on the polygraph test. Even if you used it 7 years ago, you just be fully.
Absolutely.
And again, I have never taken a polygraph test.
No, but you're right.
Yeah.
You have to go in there basically willing to be an open book. I did. I told them every single, stuff that I would never tell a therapist, right? I told them I would never tell my priest. I told them because you just don't know what they know or if they can find it out. And it's better to just be honest and upfront and own it. Totally own it.
All right. So that's your credentials are pretty. One aside too, and we'll discuss this in another segment. The fact that you have a PhD in geology really played into germline as an example, because the war is over rare earth metals that
That's correct.
posit. So that just kind of we'll discuss that kind of in an upcoming segment. But
and you know what? You know what? I'm sorry to interrupt. Bain would be mad if I didn't continue and say I'm now writing science fiction books with Bain Books.
And the two books are?
Yeah, the two books are Tiger Bright and Tiger Burning. So definitely check those out. This is more space opera, far future, kind of typical science fiction stories that are written to be entertaining. This is not fine literature. This is stuff that you would pick up and want to enjoy at the beach or something like that.
And you also have two stories with me in which anthologies? Weird
Yeah,
World War III and Weird World War IV.
Yep. And one coming up. What's the title of your next one, Sean?
Weird World War III, China.
Okay, all right. I always forget that one for some reason.
Oh, by the way, I asked that. I asked that question on the Hulu episode as well. Right? Like, do you have, if you do something that won't pass the Chinese censors, will it get?
That's a good question.
And the answer is interesting. I'm gonna let I'll tell you afterwards, so you don't have to watch the whole video. But
no, but the topics of my books. I've always wondered that. Am I stabbing myself in the back by making the adversary China?
Yeah, there's a very clear answer to that question.
Okay.
Viewers will have to tune into the episode, but just remind me after this is over, TC, and I'll tell you what the answer is.
Will do. Nah, viewers.
You have to watch a 1 hour video to get to it. So good luck with that. All right. Now I think we're like 10 minutes in. I don't think we started talking about okay, so let's set the stage. So this is going to air on the 18th, but today is the 12th. Okay. So what do we know as of today? Well, I believe that the Russian staff.
Well, hold on a second.
US staff,
you have a background that enables you to talk in some great detail about this too. Does your audience know what your background is by now?
A little bit, right? I haven't talked too much about it, but I spent 5 years at the National Training Center as a member of an organization called the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, but nominally there it was the Opposing Forces, or OP4. And I was trained using Soviet doctrine and tactics so that we could fight against U.S. forces in war games, large force-on-force war games, brigade combat team-sized elements. You're talking 5,000 people on each side, hundreds of tanks, and where we fight in the desert, in the Mojave Desert, in an area about 1,000 square miles, which is the size of the state of Rhode Island. And I became an expert on. I learned how to deploy chemical weapons in combat. I learned how to use FASTCAM, which is artillery launched minefields to shape a battlefield environment. Which I don't quite know if the U.S. uses those or not.
I don't know either. We don't use chemical weapons at this point.
We definitely don't use chemical weapons, but the Russians do, and they have a difference between persistent, non-persistent, right? So if you want to slime an area for forever,
right? Denial of terrain using persistent agents is all part of their doctrine.
Oh yeah, and we also used it to push people into kill sacks. So, but you had to look at wind conditions, and there's a whole science behind it that's
tricky.
Yeah, so which is oddly, we're probably the only unit in the U.S. military that knows how to utilize weapons.
Well, I'm glad to hear you guys were doing that. I didn't know that we trained that way, and that's good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I spent 5 years doing that, and then I also worked at the Harvard-Stanford Preventive Defense Project. My master's thesis was on Plan B for Iran's nuclear program. I wrote that plan in 2006, and I don't know if it informed U.S. strategy or not, but Iran still doesn't have nuclear weapons as far as I know. So maybe it worked. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, there's also something, a little thing called Stuxnet that you know, had something to do with that. And
I'd
you know,
love to say no comment as if I know the whole story. I don't know anything about it. So
well, I worked at a company I worked at the company that discovered it.
oh
So
wow.
I worked at Symantec and they discovered it. So I
Yeah.
was kind of internally, I was like, guys, what are you doing? So anyway, that's kind of the background that I bring to this. So let's take stock of kind of where it is right now. So you have you know, Russian forces kind of surrounding Ukraine from the north, the east, and sort of the southeast. Um, Again, I'm reading like sporadic reports from different, you know, a lot of different sources, but um, you know, I think some like amateur observer reported that there were 6 amphibious. Um, I don't know what,
LSTs.
yeah, LSTs that are kind of in the Black Sea right now, and each one of these LSTs can carry either 10 tanks or 360 troops. I you know those if they were utilized, they would be utilized likely in Odessa, I think is the right place.
Definitely on the southern coast
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, and maybe on the Kerch Strait, perhaps to seize that, so that you know, to deny Ukraine a land bridge to the sea. Um, so I'm just, you know, in terms of developments, there's also the U.S. and Russia have asked all non-essential personnel to evacuate their embassies and consulates, in Ukraine. I think that's recently. The exercise that's in Belarus is scheduled to end on February 20th, which is conveniently the same day that the Olympics ends. And those forces are positioned north. So yeah, there's plenty of other developments. There's kind of diplomacy going on and things like that. But this feels to me like it felt back in October 2002 when I was in the Army, and there was a lot of this diplomatic activity between the U.S. and you know, other countries in the UN. And at the time, it was pretty certain we were going to war. Like it was more of a kind of, it felt, I don't want to characterize it as, you know, definitive, but it felt like it was we were just going through the motions, and that feels very much like Putin right now. Like he's moved his forces into place, and I say this over and over again on this show, but you can do anything with bayonets except sit on them. You don't move 130, and I think 130,000 troops are in place now. There have been reports of field hospitals moving forward. You know, there's an earlier report that he didn't have enough blood, right? There, you know, it's kind of a to point to maybe him having a big faint. But I think subsequently there's reports there were enough field hospitals to handle what was going on. And again, I covered this on a previous show, but the days are a little bit longer in February. So in Ukraine in January, there were 8.5 hours of daylight. When it's longer, I mean hours of daylight. They're not days pretty much the same length every day. So you have 8.5 hours of daylight in January, but you have about 10 hours of daylight in February. And then the Rasputitsa? It's the name of the mud. Rasputitsa, something like that. I probably completely murdered it, but and it seems like the ground is still not hardening, right? It seems like a relatively warmer winter, which is not great for tanks. If you ever operated it in mud, in Fort Knox, I did. It's a nightmare. But you can still it's not a showstopper. It's just really inconvenient. You can get bogged down.
Yeah.
So that's, those are tidbits from what I know, but I haven't done a full refresh on all my sources in the last, few days. Anything else publicly reported, TC, that I should add?
No, I'll probably remember once I start talking other things that I've been reading, but in terms of describing the overall situation, I think that's a pretty good starting point.
So what do you think happens from here? What?
Well, I think that I also believe the date that you chose after the Olympics is probably a good date. That's from just reading news articles the way you have been.
When you say a relatively good date, do you mean that that's when the clock starts, or that's when the invasion starts?
First of all, let me be clear. I agree that reading the tea leaves, there's going to be an invasion. Right. I'm not one of these people who's out there screaming, "Hey, this could all just be, Putin trying to bully its neighbor, and he's not going to invade." I don't believe that for a second. Putin does what he says, and just to make this broaden the picture a little bit, what people kind of haven't been focusing on is that what's going on in Ukraine is not the only thing that Putin and Lavrov have been complaining about. It's a much bigger picture that they've been signaling to the West is unacceptable to them, and that they intend to do something about. So what I worry about is, I don't mean to get beyond Ukraine. I'll just do this for a second and then go back to Ukraine.
No, but this is important though. This is important to think about. What are not only what are his moves in the next week, but also what's the longer term strategic objective?
Yep. So the longer term strategic objective is they want NATO off their doorstep, period. It is really that simple. And we are on their doorstep. Forget about Ukraine. We've got 2 NATO countries. Sean, I always look at this and then forget for some reason. I'm old. It happens.
Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania.
Thank you. Yeah. Which of those 2 are NATO countries? I can't remember. But the Baltics. The Baltics are already at play. And after Ukraine is taken, which I think it will be, the pressure only ramps up from there. The question is, what's the timeline?
So let me stop you right there. So when you say after Ukraine is taken, what do you mean by that? Because I have a very specific conception myself of what that means. But I want to hear what you have, and then I'll kind of talk about the thing.
I don't have a specific idea of what it means, but I will. There are a couple of specific conclusions I've gone ahead and drawn based on what you laid out in terms of the scenario that Russia's facing and Ukraine is facing. First of all, let me caveat everything I'm saying. I don't mean to sound inhuman or unsympathetic to the plight of the Ukrainians, but my job and my background is this stuff. It's very much the same way a physician. You don't want a physician who's going to come in wringing his or her hands, oh my God, what if this person dies? You want somebody who doesn't give a damn about that.
He's just objective and analytical. And by the way, that's my fault too. Like I have to think about emoting for things because I think that's also why, and I hope I'm wrong, but that's why I think I'm going to be right, because I don't have any emotional attachment to the situation.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just looking at the data, and the data is screaming that something's going to happen. But
it is. Yeah, I agree with that assessment. But anyway, I think that based on what you laid out in terms of what they're facing, weather, timing, et cetera, I would have to conclude that Putin thinks this is going to be wrapped up in a very short period of time. And what's curious to me is that what we're looking at here, you drew the comparison between 2002, and that's exactly correct. I'll add to that. What the Russians are trying here is a very Rumsfeldian kind of approach to conducting warfare.
It's almost the same number of troops. I think it was 160,000 in
Ukraine.
Iraq.
It's a big country. I don't know how it compares to Iraq.
A lot bigger.
It's vast, and probably the military is better than the Iraqi military.
Likely a lot better.
And so it tells me that Putin has great confidence in his armed forces' ability to do combined arms operations, move quickly, and coordinate everything. I don't know about perfectly. Nothing ever happens perfectly in war, but perfectly enough, right, to get the job done. Now, you mentioned, what is the job? Take the entire country.
Again, I have
Take
a
more.
very specific
Yeah.
idea
Take
of how
more
it's
of
going to
the
happen. Yeah.
take more of the eastern part of the country. I would argue they're certainly going to take everything from the Dnieper River eastward, including Kiev. What happens west of that, I don't know. I'm not even sure I have an opinion.
So okay, so here's what I think's going to happen. So we talked about when Operation Cobra 2 started, which I think was the invasion of Iraq, or and it was based on the Cobra. Operation Cobra was an operation to seize the I can't pronounce it in French. It's like spelled fillets, but it's probably fillet gap or something like that. In World War II in France. So the invasion of Iraq was Operation Cobra 2. In that operation, I believe we used 160,000 troops. But Iraq is a much smaller country than Ukraine and had a much smaller population. Okay. And likely was less sophisticated. But if you remember, we did a lot of psyops in that campaign where whole divisions of troops just dissolved into the into the countryside and things like that. So when you talked about a Rumsfeldian sort of concept, I think that's right. Now the other thing, and this is if you go back to the episode with Dr. Sean McFate, and I got to call you Dr. McCarthy for this because I keep you guys working in defense. You never call yourself doctors, even though you got a PhD in something hard.
What's funny is we used to see George Tenet walking the halls at the CIA. You just call him George,
Yeah. So where was it? So right now, Putin has about 130,000 troops, massed around the border. I don't think that's enough to seize the whole country. It's not remotely enough. And also, you mentioned something and the other piece, going back to talking about with Dr. Sean McFate, he was more of the more in the gray warfield affair side, right? Where he thinks Putin's going to do something that conserves his forces and doesn't really have to come out. And I don't remember. You have to watch the episode. I can't remember if he, up to this point, that's exactly what Putin has done in most of his operations. There's more of a military aspect to the invasion of Georgia. But in Crimea, he basically seized it without a shot, taking a shot. I'm sure there's limited exchange, but very low to no casualties. And then there's been a proxy war essentially going on in eastern Ukraine since 2014, where there's people who are, Russian volunteers who are really conscripts that are, sent across the border to fight on the behalf of the Russian Empire. It's not an empire, but
I still say Soviet Union.
The problem is when I put my head into this thing, I start thinking like Putin, right? And yeah. I'm always right about what he's going to do because I can think. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I look at the map. I look at the way the forces are arrayed, and here's what I think is going to happen. I think there'll probably be a limited operation to seize at least the Kerch Strait to deny the Ukrainians the access to the Black Sea. I think that's going to happen no matter what. Now, whether or not they use amphibious forces to do it, that's a riskier kind of operation. I think those forces are equally as likely to be deception or a feint, right? But I think you could probably seize that strait with some Spetsnaz and kind of do what you need to do. So I think in the eastern side of Ukraine, I think that'll be another feint. I think that'll just be used to suck up the bulk of the Ukrainian military into like, look what I got here, look at this shiny object. I think the main effort is going to be moving south from Russia and Belarus, and I think you're going to have one pincer movement, but two sides to that movement. You need to come through Belarus to avoid a major river crossing to encircle Kiev, and then in order to get, and then I think the second feint will come from Russia, which will just be across the river, but it won't necessitate you have to cross. And I think they're just going to encircle Kiev, and they're going to use that as a bargaining chip to enforce a regime change in the country. Now, there'll be a bunch of other false flag operations, right? So like Putin did in Chechnya, where he blew up an apartment complex like of Russian citizens as a casus belli. And so, he's going to there will be something like that where, look, I've been talking about peace. It's been very important to me, but you just killed some.
I have to jump in here because there's something that's been going on that has really ticked me off, and that's Macron and Erdogan and their little ventures, right, to put themselves up on the stage of diplomacy. And it kills me, because if we assume that what the president is saying, that there will be a false flag like you just described, if we assume that that's true,
whatever gains they make, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all. In fact, they're helping Putin. They're helping Putin say to his country, look at all the talking I did. I really thought we were making progress.
And then you got to rein these guys in. These Ukrainians, they're wild. They're crazy.
Totally, like the Russians have perfected that. I used to watch it as a kid with, back when I grew up, there was the Soviet Union, and they were just masters at this kind of BS diplomacy, where it's called Maskarovka, right?
Yeah,
they're not
everything
playing.
They do.
They're not playing to a Western audience. They don't care that we look at it and go, oh, that's such crap, right? They're playing to their audience, and it works. And we're helping them. Well, I say we, Macron and Erdogan are helping them, and it just makes me sick.
Well, here's the other issue, right? We, instead of constraining NATO or being intelligent about who to accept in that treaty that has a sacred duty to defend any member who's attacked, much like which has echoes of the alliance system from the predating the First World War. We should have been a little bit more cautious about that, because again, I'm going to put myself into Putin's perspective, right? And he's like, the Russians will say things that are utterly ridiculous, right? Like I think they compared, and I want to put that out first, because I'm going to say something that does resonate that they said, and you have to separate the two. But I think Lavrov may have said something to the effect of, we're the likelihood of us invading Ukraine is the same likelihood of the United States invading the United Kingdom, right? And it's just like rhetoric like that is like so stupid and so like ridiculously over the top and disingenuous. But one thing that they did say that was a little bit more on point is, if in an alternative future, alternative history, the Soviet Union, had it still existed, started had allowed Mexico and Canada to join the Warsaw Pact. Like, do you think we wouldn't fucking move the U.S. Army? Like,
hey.
Right? And we wouldn't false flag it either. We would just do it. Like, we were just like, no, this is unacceptable. Monroe Doctrine, bitches.
I was just about to say the Monroe Doctrine was enforced for a very long time. I don't even know if people know what that is these days,
Yeah, well, I mean, Roosevelt was Theodore Roosevelt was pretty. I think he sent like a warship. Like, there's a German warship at one point, and he sent like a warship, and he's just like, oh, we're just doing some diplomatic work down here, But he sent like a armada to send a message. at the same time, I think the Russians are also starting to reignite some of their ties to.
If I could back up 1 second.
Yeah,
and
sorry, I like take this stuff spiraling
Yeah,
to
yeah.
different directions.
and comment on a direction you were heading, which was, being more discerning about who we let into NATO, that sort of stuff. I don't have any insight into NATO politics or NATO strategy, so this is complete guesswork on my part.
The iron law of bureaucracy.
Yeah. I look at it and I think there was no planning here. There was no thought to what we're facing now.
Well, over time, and this is a Dr. Purnell concept. Over time, the purpose of bureaucracy, may in NATO, for instance, was to defend Europe, but over time, as bureaucracies evolve, the purpose of the bureaucracy becomes to self-perpetuate the bureaucracy.
Right.
And I think
right.
That's exactly what NATO has become.
Yes. I don't think for a second that if Russia were to invade the Baltics, that we would come to defend them, even though we have 1,000 or so troops. I doubt that. Let me put it another way. I don't think it would be automatic, the decision that we're going to go ahead and defend them and send more troops there. I really don't. I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's not good.
But I don't get a warm, fuzzy feeling, except for the Brits. The Brits have been bulldogs about a lot of this stuff.
Well, you would be too if Putin assassinated people on your own turf.
Well, yeah, and you got to realize as well that there's a generational memory of World War II that's different for Britain than it is for us. It's different for Russia than it is for us. I think that both those nations are still very much steeped in the lessons of that war, and perhaps even World War I as well. We haven't faced that kind of conflict on our borders or on our shores, if you're talking about mainland Europe. And I've lost my train of thought. I was going to say something else about Baltics and NATO. Maybe it'll come back to me. But in general, I look at this and I think to myself, this was not well planned, and this was not well thought out in terms of where we are today.
Here's the second piece of that argument that neither of us has mentioned yet. So on the political side, we pushed the borders all the way up to the doorstep of Russia, which historically has always sought to have borders because they have a painful memory of people, even when they had a buffer, right? Hitler killed 20 million of them.
There's no real natural barrier to prevent a massive army from just sweeping in. They've been invaded how many times? Napoleon, Germany has fought them twice.
Sweden.
I didn't know that one.
Charles XII, Battle of Poltava. And not only that, before that, you had the Mongols like sweeping through the Grand Khanate.
Japan kicked their asses. They have,
1905, right?
They have some bad memories. So yeah, you've got to take that into account. You can't just treat your enemy as this monster. They're human beings with the same kind of fears that we have.
So the second piece that neither of us discussed, on the political side, we kept pushing to the border, right? On the military side, we kept withdrawing forces. Like right now we only.
That is what I was going to say. Yeah, keep going.
Right now we only have 2 brigade combat teams, or I shouldn't say, fighting kind of fighting brigades.
Right, Europe. We've got 60,000 people in Europe, but those aren't all combat troops. There's a very small percentage. Now
that doesn't include the 8 or 9,000 that Biden's sending from the 82nd Airborne, and there's like a National Guard unit and some special forces in I think Lviv. I have no idea how to pronounce it.
I don't know how to pronounce that either. That's a weird city name.
But they're training units and things like that. So not well coordinated, guys. Not good. So the rationale to that though is if I'm Putin, right? My view is, guys, I don't give a shit like about all this talk. What can you do about it? At least in the immediate term, absolutely nothing. Now you might do this like swift, transaction freezes and this and that. But even that concerns me a little bit because, in the short term, it's a good move. In the long term, you're just creating the conditions for an alternate currency.
Well,
right?
let me
I'm
say
sorry, I like
something.
go into all these threads.
No.
But
Don't remind me to talk about retribution, but I want to back up 1 second and talk about military drawdown. Not only did we withdraw our troops, I know we still do exercises, NATO exercises,
right.
but countries like Sweden almost completely disarmed. And Germany, okay, they still field Leopard tanks. Have they been upgraded, modified, modernized? I really don't know the status
No,
of Europe's armies.
The Leopard is a good tank.
Okay, all right. But we're caught in a situation here where in order to bring forces to bear, there has to be a major effort. And some countries like Sweden, unfortunately, it's going to take them, look, God love them. They've been trying since 2014 to bring back their military. But that stuff takes time. It takes a lot of time. And you can hate Trump all you want. There are many things to hate about Trump. I think that one thing, let's not say he got it right, but I think there was an element of his argument that was valid and worthy of taking a closer look at, was NATO obligations. And were nations actually fulfilling their NATO obligations? We might be in better shape right now had that been taken seriously. Not that it wasn't. Again, I wasn't on the inside, and I'm not a student of NATO, and I don't know.
Speaking of being in better shape right now, let's talk about Germany.
Yeah.
Right. Who basically I don't know.
Let's get rid of nukes.
Yeah, I don't know if they've completed the decommissioning of these. I haven't really delved into the detail of it, but like, how stupid can you be?
Yeah.
Right. Like solar and wind they're peaking power sources. They're not base load power. So you only have two options for base load, and by base load, by peaking power, the problem with solar and wind is it's intermittent. Right. The sun, you only get the energy during the day. Wind, you only get it during certain times of the early morning, or depending on, and you can, and even then, like it's variable. It varies with the weather, etc. And so typically you have either diesel gen sets or some sort of natural gas backup, because you can't have those things fail. Now you can store some of the energy, but storage is the problem that's always 10 years away from being solved. Right. So even when I covered clean energy at Morgan Stanley 10 years ago, it was always 10 years away. It's still not here. So you only really have two options. You have coal, which is dirty as shit, or you have, well, I guess there's clean coal, but that's
Hey, I'm a fan of coal. Let's give those jobs back to West Virginia miners. I used to live near there. I'm a coal fan.
Yeah, it's not a great job. Now nuclear, it's like the cleanest form of energy, like zero emissions. Now you have the storage problem, but the French have figured that stuff out.
I think it's off the table for Germany right now. I think that they're if they want to fix this problem in short term, I think coal power plants are in their future. If they're serious about it, they're going to have to throw up a few of those, and then long term go nuclear.
Yeah, either that, or they're paying tolls to Russia and bending the knee.
And I don't know, they may be happy with that. That may be fine for them. Who knows? In which case, I think we all ought to take a closer look at, is Germany a good NATO ally?
Yeah.
And let's not talk about Turkey.
Das weiß ich nicht.
What does that mean?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
or I don't know. Ich habe keine Idee is I have no idea. But
let's talk about retribution, right?
Here we are. Then you get into cyber. Cyber. Go ahead. I'll let you.
Here we are throwing weapons over the border. The UK has also thrown weapons over the border, and I don't know if they have troops there or not, but they've got this alliance with Poland and Ukraine. So it wouldn't surprise me if they've got more than just weapons, being shipped into Ukraine. And the Russians have publicly announced that they're not happy with that. And if this rapid kind of advance that Putin, I'm sure, envisions is bogged down in any way, if troops are lost in greater numbers than they had anticipated, and it starts to become unpopular to the Russian populace, that is when I become worried about not just cyber attacks, but destructive cyber attacks. And to the audience, Sean and I talk about this stuff all the time, like offline. So I should probably go into more detail here, but maybe I'll let you do that. But destructive cyber attacks could really be a bad thing, not just for us, but for all of Europe.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so the Russians do have, we talk about SWIFT and things like that. The Russians have other ways of retaliating, which could be catastrophic. And you don't even have to go to the nuke, the nuke side.
What was the solar flare thing that was going on? Not even a year ago, where supply chain, right? Was that the Russians? I can't remember now. It's totally. I'm totally
I don't know about. I mean, solar flares are solar flares, right? But
no. I mean
solar winds.
Solar winds. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. That was the Russians.
That was huge. I don't know if people understand that. The average person on the street doesn't understand supply chain and what it means getting in upstream in the supply chain. But suddenly you're questioning everything that we feel, everything, military, civilian, whatever, everything.
Yeah, it's. And the other thing too is we talk about 0-day vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah.
You can only use these things once, and I'm sure they have plenty of them, and we have plenty of them, right? So, and they know that too. So, while I would say the United States has the most lethal cyber attack capability, but we're also probably the most vulnerable in the world in terms of the impact of an attack. So
our grid is a big weak spot, always has been.
Well, do you know? I mean, there was a big blackout in 2003. Do you know what the cause of that was?
No. Do you?
Okay. No.
I don't even remember. Is this New York? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I bet if we Googled it, we'd find it, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's been a while since I looked at it.
Oh, that's the one you and I were talking about in terms of lessons learned.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like it's an archaic infrastructure issue.
Yeah.
Right. So hopefully this gigantic infrastructure bill, hopefully they fix this stuff.
I can't remember where I read this, but we have these massive transformers that we rely on, and in our infinite wisdom, production of these transformers is no longer done in the US. It's done overseas, and you can probably imagine where it's done.
China.
Yeah. So if our transformers go down in any meaningful way,
it'll take months.
It will take months, if not like a year, to get replacements installed. These things are massive, Sean. Like they'll be on the back of a semi trailer taking up like 3 lanes of traffic in a major highway, right? I mean, they're massive. These are not easy to build or move around. And it's just, they're critical vulnerabilities in our infrastructure that everyone knows about.
Well, the other thing is, I don't want to scare people with this. I mean, ultimately, if something did break out, we would be able to redeploy forces and, in time, and, be able to, because the quality of our forces was, if you take the 2018 incident in February 2018 that Sean McFade also discussed.
They're making a movie about that, I believe.
Are they really?
Yeah, you're talking about Syria, right?
Yeah.
So
just for people who haven't watched that other video, in February 2018, there was a group of 300 to 400 Russian-speaking mercenaries that went to seize either an oil field or refinery, Conoco refinery, something like that, in Syria, because that's how these, like the Wagner group, that's how they get paid. And there's a group of U.S. Special Forces, Delta Force. They were in the area, and they radioed the Russians and also woke up Mattis, and they asked the Russians, "Hey, we have like tanks, like Russian tanks and like armored vehicles, like coming to attack us. Are you aware of this? And the Russians are, we know nothing, right? And so, the U.S. forces are like, we're going to attack them. If like, are you sure? Yes, we're sure. We don't know who these people are. So, it was a turkey shoot,
Yeah.
right? No U.S. casualties at all.
Yep.
And,
Slaughter.
Yeah. Now, the media is kind of not necessarily reported it as, so Sean interviewed people on both sides.
Wow.
So he interviewed people in the Wagner group and things like that. So the engagement was actually, it was like a 4 to 7 hour fight. Like the Russians didn't go down, not fighting, they fought. But when you have, AC-130 Spectre gunships and Apaches and Hellfire missiles and things like that, and you have, those guys had no air support.
Right.
So I mean, that's super key. Which, going back to the current situation we're talking about, Russia's going to have their superiority, which is also another.
Absolutely.
So going back to just the scenario of how this thing might kind of unfold, I think that initial thrust will be the bloodiest part of the operation, because my understanding, I could be wrong, is that Ukrainian forces have been relatively hardened in their positions for, since 2014. So these static defenses, the Russians know exactly where they are. They're pretty well dialed in. I think the Russians moved thermobaric weapons.
Yeah, you and I talked about that.
Yeah, so that helps you clear trenches pretty efficiently. You suck the air out of it and just
bunkers and trenches.
So I think that part of the battle will be pretty ugly. If the Iranians, if the Iranians,
that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah. I got to tell you something after this. So I think if the Ukrainians now have a Javelin missile, right? I think if they put those things in the front, like in the very front lines, I think it'd probably be a bad move. I think what you got to do is put them in places. You can have a lot of coverage against Russian tanks if you spread them out and you hide them in non-obvious places. The Ukrainians could wreak absolute havoc on. And I know, because I fought the 82nd Airborne in training when they first deployed Javelin missiles, and I had to draw on my maps 4,000 kilometer circles around kind of terrain features where infantry could be hiding, and I just had to give them a wide berth. And my colleagues who didn't do that got fucking slaughtered.
Yeah, I believe it. It's a great weapon. I love the Javelin. Very capable. Yeah. But you're right. That's what the TOS-1, the thermobaric rocket launchers, that's precisely what those were designed for. And they used them to great effect in Grozny. Just completely obliterated the city with those things. They're highly, highly effective and catastrophic. They're literally, the Russians refer to them as flamethrowers because they're literally filled with napalm jelly, right? That just vaporizes and then detonates.
Sticks to people. And
it's a brutal weapon. They also have a shoulder launched variant called like the Bumblebee or something. So infantry units have a little mini thermobaric weapon that they carry around with them that employed correctly can take out the entire floor of a concrete building if you get it through the window. It's just really, really, really sick stuff.
Now, how long do you think the Russians? So during the Cold War, the Russian military solved for mass and quantity over quality. So they didn't care if the tanks broke down 3 weeks into the operation because they had plenty of tanks, right? The U.S. was kind of more of a quality sort of enterprise, but we certainly didn't have the quantity. Has that changed with the Russians, or are we still dealing with the traditional take special units like Spetsnaz and things like that aside? We're talking about like the conscript side of the Russians. Are they still
they're still using AKs, right? At the infantry level. That has not changed at all. I believe Russia still fields T-72s. Now they've all been improved.
Right.
You'll see pictures of them with reactive armor and those sorts of things. So it's not like it's just the stagnant original T-72 that we faced in Iraq. It's an up-armored, up-teched kind of version of the T-72, but they're still T-72s. So you and I have talked about this in the past. I think that I don't see indications that they've deviated from that idea of quantity over quality.
Right.
I think during the invasion of Ukraine, I don't think it's going to be a big issue for them.
Because he's planning for a fast, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think
Driving
it's
for a
just gonna,
political solution
I mean,
rather than a military solution.
and we haven't talked about things like, Russia has masked tactical ballistic missiles around Ukraine.
I was actually going to ask you about the Iskander.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
so
what's the purpose of those things? Like,
so
in your opinion, for this
that is a
operation?
great question. And this gets back to my caveat of not wanting to sound unsympathetic, but for somebody who does this kind of work, I'm very eager. I know that sounds bad, but I'm eager to see how they're employed, because I don't know if we've seen them use the Iskander. I could be wrong, but I don't know if we've seen them use it in something like this, which is potentially a major invasion. So if I had to guess, I'd say key command and control targets would be my guess. They're not going to be nuclear tipped or chemical and biological warfare, weapon
let's
tipped.
actually engage on that too after we get through this thread, because
Yeah,
nobody's talking about that. And I haven't even thought myself whether or not, but put that aside.
Yeah.
Let's finish this. So what? Yeah. So it's kind of why, like,
I would
command
guess
and control targets.
decapitation strikes against military command and control would be my first guess, and that's probably not all, but SAM sites maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure.
And maybe, I mean, are they too close to be used against trench systems?
I don't think that you would. They're expensive things, I would imagine, to launch one of those.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought.
So I don't think you're going to waste it on just clearing trenches. It's great. It's a great range. One of the biggest drawbacks of the flamethrower system, the TOS-1 system, is it's kind of a short range. I think it's like 3 or 4 kilometers. And the Iskander has a much greater range. So
what kind of payloads can they fire? Right. So here's an example. So you're familiar with fast cam, right? They can't fire fast. They can't fire fast cam.
Is that the mine delivery thing? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I'm not a missile expert, unfortunately.
Right.
But I know they can carry an HE payload. How big it is, how heavy it is, I don't know. But I would guess, and I'm sure this is correct, given the fact that it's pretty much open knowledge that they're nuclear capable. You can swap warheads. So they've got multiple warhead types you can put on there. I just don't know what they are.
It might also be like it might also just be a message, right?
Yeah.
Could be. I doubt it. I think they tend to use it, but I think that the dual purpose of it is like, oh, these things could also be nuclear tipped if we wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. And they probably have other tactical missile systems deployed that I'm not aware of. So from that perspective, again, it gets back to that original kind of discussion we were having about the Rumsfeldian aspect of this. We are about to see a display of the Russian version of combined arms engagement.
Yeah, I think it will be some combination of the usual kind of Maskarovka tactics, great tactics that Putin used, little green men. But there has to be some conventional element.
Yeah. Oh, and getting back to your question, which was, have the Russians gone from quantity over quality? I think that if we would have a problem if we were to engage with the Russians, because they have not done that. Like, and bear with me here, because this is, I could be totally wrong. This is kind of an uneducated, uninvestigated hypothesis I've had for some time. But let's say they were to engage with NATO. I think the first thing that we'd lose as NATO members is all of our overhead assets in terms of satellites and that sort of stuff. I think those would be gone very quickly. We've seen the Chinese look at anti-satellite systems and practice with them. I imagine the Russians have the same capability. Once that happens, we lose one piece of our technological edge, right? UAVs and that sort of stuff, I don't know what happens there, but there becomes a point where all of these kind of electronic capabilities we have installed on our machines, our tanks, our striker vehicles, go down the list. When do those stop functioning and give us that, when does that edge disappear for us?
Or so this goes right into the gray zone tactics. So not only do you have this conventional thrust that I think about, but if I'm Putin, I'm bribing battlefield commanders to just kind of move away. I'm using the same sort of satellite technology that you're talking about to because I don't know if the Ukrainians use GLONASS or GPS.
Don't know.
But if they are using some form of GPS, there may be technologies where you can confuse units where they think they're located in one place, but
Sure.
you have them go into the wrong direction by spoofing their
so instead of destroying technology, using it against them.
Exactly. So you have units that start like dropping artillery on each other. I don't know if Putin has like quite that capability, but it's within the realm of possibility. And then you're gonna have like a bunch of special operators. I would imagine Spetsnaz or Russian what is it, the VDV, the airborne units, seizing key airfields, and then also kind of Spetsnaz going after capturing leadership, right? And I think this is going to be definitely like focused on a head strike, like a decapitation strike, focused on Kiev, or Kyiv, whatever it's called. Again, I feel terrible, but I'm just so used to saying Kiev.
Well,
let me apologize.
This is not something that you have said, but I've heard it mentioned by others, and it's a pet peeve of mine. When they talk about gray zone warfare, there are a number of different names for it, right? And the Russians are masters at it. The Chinese are masters at it. We're trying to come up to speed on how to execute it. Another word or phrase for it is competition short of armed conflict. And what a lot of pundits I'm seeing in the news assume is that gray zone warfare does not include kinetic strikes, does not include, tank battles or artillery.
No, it absolutely does.
That is not the case. It does. It's a full spectrum. The idea is, what can you do without triggering a response from your peer adversaries, right? That's the idea. And if you can get away with artillery strikes and Iskander missiles, then, the Russians are going to do it. We saw it in Georgia. We saw it in the first Crimea invasion. There absolutely can be an element of kinetic strike. And so it just bugs me when I see these people, I just lost picture. Are we still good?
Yeah, I can see them just fine.
Okay. I see these pundits who are probably getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It's painful to watch. I see people in the administration. I'm like, how the hell did they become national security advisors?
It's crazy.
They're smart people, but they have no military expertise whatsoever.
I just read something
horrifying.
Now. I think this was from the Russian press, so take it with a grain of salt. But if it's true, we should all be freaking vomiting. And the UK foreign minister, what's her name? Truss? I can't remember her name.
I don't know.
Was talking to Lavrov, and she was furious about what's going on, and rightfully so. And Lavrov was doing his kind of arguments back that you've kind of mentioned already. And one of the things he said was, so, Madam Minister, do you think that, we have no right to the Volgograd region? Or blah, 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 blah. And she said, no, you don't. And he said at that point, the writer of the article said at that point, one of her aides leaned over and whispered, those regions are inside Russia, Madam Foreign Minister. And I said to one of my colleagues, oh my God, I'm qualified to be the UK foreign minister.
this is a common complaint. I always rant about this, but we have the most lethal military force in history that is run by the most incompetent
Yes.
political elite in history.
That
and it's terrifying.
One of the greatest advantages that North Korea has over us, China, Russia.
They promote engineers, not
What's
lawyers.
that?
They promote engineers, not
Well,
lawyers.
that may be part of it. What I was going to say is when you look at their diplomatic corps and their foreign ministries, there is longevity and continuity.
Yeah. Lavrov's been there forever.
Yeah. They have a game plan. They stick to it. They practice that game plan. They actually sit down and have a, like you were out at the training ground. They'll have a red team of negotiators go up against Lavrov, and you know what I mean? They game this stuff out, man. And
Speaking
they
of
know,
which, the Chinese have copied that. They have a blue force now.
Oh, do they really?
North of Beijing in the massive training area. Yeah, like
commie bastards.
They like literally they wanted to like have at the tank level, they wanted to have representatives like watch us in war games. Yeah. And of course we rightly said no, not a good idea.
But politically speaking, our elected officials are in charge of our military.
Yeah.
That means every 4 years we could get a new Secretary of State along with a new bolus of appointees at State Department. You'll have the civil servants who are there long term, but they're not in charge, right? I mean, they have to do as they're told. And I think that maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the NGOs were established to try and create that longevity in a sense, right? Like the Council on Foreign Relations.
Well, there is some longevity inside, like in U.S. institutions, right? In the CIA, State Department, like there's
yeah. Well, State Department,
like you don't go to,
I would say.
Like because you don't send a political appointee to Chad, as an example, right? Like
no. Right. So in that sense, yes. But in terms of policies and appointees for implementing those policies, State Department, there's massive turnover every 8 years, every 4 years.
There is a bit of a bulwark in academia, right? So there's a lot of people who will come in and out of academia, and at least on the defense side, the Democrats and Republicans, at least like 15 years ago when I was still involved, were very close in alignment and agreement. So the expansion of NATO and all that stuff, like that's not the Democrats' fault. It's not the Republicans' fault. Like both administrations equally pushed it forward.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right.
And I honestly, I don't mean to, even though I've been ragging on our system, I prefer our system over the Russian and Chinese.
Of course, because we're more adaptable. We are in the end, we are much more adaptable.
Yes.
Right. During war, the incompetence is exposed, and then like Kasserine Pass, right? Like,
yes.
In World War II, what happened? Well, then Patton's in charge, right?
Right. And I'll take the freedom and all the warts that come with it for independent thought and the kinds of, one of the things I love about our military is the fact that I don't know if that's true today, but the whole concept of small unit tactics and the
NCO Corps. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Hey, if this guy dies, if this guy dies, you're in charge, man. Start thinking, right? Like it really works.
Yeah. All right. So two last things, and then I think we went way over. But
yeah, I got it. I don't have too much. Another hour. I got to go probably.
What time? So two quick things. Chemical weapons.
Okay.
Is there any chance that's going to be used?
Yes. And I say that.
Well, here's the other thing. Do the Ukrainians use chemical weapons too?
That I don't know. Couldn't tell you. If they use them, then you're absolutely, you can be sure the Russians are going to respond in kind. But I say yes, meaning there's a non-zero probability, right? I think it's very small, obviously, incredibly small. But you can't take it off the table because we've seen them use what I would call chemical weapons for assassinations.
And also like just pumping like with fentanyl gas with fentanyl
That
in
was the
the
next
church.
example. Yes,
Yeah.
in the theater.
So stuff that's just right on the line, right on the line.
They have non-lethal chemical weapons they could use. So that's a possibility. And I know that there were reports in the press. Now you got to be careful with these, because a lot of times, you know, if you're a Chechnyan fighting Russia, a lot of them would run to the press and say, "Oh my gosh, they're using chemical weapons," and it's white phosphorus, right? It's smoke.
Well, no, white phosphorus. You can't use whiskey Pete. You can't use whiskey Pete.
You can't use it anymore. But
I don't like.
It's not what we would think is a traditional. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can, but you're not supposed to use it on people.
Well, yeah, right. And it's not what we would think of also as a traditional chemical weapon. I wouldn't anyway.
Yeah, but if you're hit with it, it's a war crime.
Yeah. It's not a good day if you've got burning phosphorus under your skin. That's not fun. But my only point is there were reports coming out of Chechnya over and over again of Russian use of chemical weapons, and it wouldn't surprise me if they actually did. I don't think the Russians have the same concerns that, let me rephrase this. I'm pretty sure the Russians don't have the same concerns that we do when it comes to human life, especially on the battlefield.
That's given the historical experience, like they're a nation of suffering, things like that.
Yeah.
So I said two things, but I actually had three things. Chernobyl is in the path from the north, from north of Kiev. Okay?
Yeah.
How is that a factor? Is that?
Man, I don't know. I haven't even given it thought. I should know, since I've worked for DOE for so long.
I mean, like, look, if I'm Putin, I see an opportunity there. Like, hey, we're gonna have to keep forces here to secure it, because I don't know. Like, there could be like artillery around. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Let me start simply. As long as you avoid the sarcophagus,
which is the containment,
right?
Like gigantic lead containment, field thing around it, right?
I think you can freely move troops through there. I don't think it's a terrain obstacle at this point. I don't know that I want my troops to stay there and start filling their canteens from the streams and everything around there. But I don't think it's a movement obstacle. So from that perspective, I think the question can be addressed. In terms of what you're talking about, is can it be used as a piece, as some sort of an element of a bigger strategy?
I would use it. I would absolutely use it. I would find a way to use it.
Why not?
Yeah, it's scary. Why not? Right? It's scary.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the last bit, this is very, very, very simple. Probability of invasion, and when do you think it kicks off?
99.999% probability of invasion. I think that if it hasn't kicked off by the end of the Olympics, that's when it kicks off. And I caveat it that way because I think you and I have discussed Russia invaded Georgia during the Beijing Olympics in 2008.
Oh, so really?
So
you think it could happen before the Olympics?
It could happen before the Olympics. Yeah. Hopefully this episode will be out there before it happens, but
yeah, we got 6 days, brother. We got 6 days.
We might not make it. I don't know. But
all right, well, just be it known, this is recorded on February 12th.
Yeah.
Okay. So
there's definitely precedent.
I still think it's such a big deal. Like Georgia, it was a big deal, but like there's not really much we could do because it was so close to Russia. I think this is a whole different enchilada, and I think Putin he's already got enough trouble to deal with on a diplomatic basis. The last thing he wants to do is snub China.
We did see him go and kiss Xi's ring, right?
Yeah.
That did happen. So yeah, that's why I think 20th or whenever the Olympics end is more likely, but I just can't discount completely the possibility.
I'm going to leave this with one last thought, and then we're going to have to cut it short. The one thing we didn't discuss, and there's not enough time for it, is we're all, the U.S., Europe, Russia, we're all focused on Ukraine. Meanwhile, China's getting exactly what they want. We're focusing important resources on an area that's not strategic for them at all. And frankly, it's not strategic for us at all either.
No,
We just don't know that. We just put ourselves in a position where we lose kind of the moral. We lose. It puts us in a more kind of a moral hazard sort of situation.
The NATO credibility issue is
it's a credibility issue. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. So anyway, TC, it's a pleasure having you on, and we're going to talk about a completely different thing that is sort of rooted in data and sort of not rooted in data. We're going to talk about the relationship between U.S. government declassified files on paranormal things, particularly the ATIP program, and things that have been recently declassified, as well as other aspects of use of paranormal abilities, things like that have just again shown up in declassified documents. I don't want to try to go anywhere where there's not historical declassified documents that we're operating off of, because I don't also want to ruin my own credibility in terms of and to be clear, I've never seen anything like any of the things that we're about to discuss, but I have read a lot of these declassified documents, so we're gonna get a little bit into that. So thank you everyone for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on Monday, because that'll be the next episode we're going to discuss, and then we'll have a third episode on TC's background as a writer and where you can check him out. So thank you for joining us, everyone, and thanks again, TC. Talk to you soon.
Yep. See you, Sean.